The TalkSport Fan Network.
The ultimate on-demand destination for the UK's best fan-led football podcasts.
Want authentic supporter insight on all things Bournemouth? Follow Up the Cherries in all departments on the TalkSport Fan Network.
Club-dedicated content created by the fans, for the fans.
Search TalkSport Fan Network.
Welcome back to Up the Cherries in all departments, all AFC Bournemouth fans, and welcome to all West Bromwich Albion fans, and of course, the rest of the footballing world. We have got another very, very, very special interview for you today. Now, of course, last time out, we beat Everton 1-0 in what was going to be Sean Dyche's last game as Everton boss. It was a bit of a slog, but we managed to get the 3 points in the end to spell the end for Dyche at Goodison Park. Now, we are away from the Premier League this weekend and in the FA Cup, which starts at the third round stage. We're taking on West Bromwich Albion. Now, before I do welcome in my special guest, here's a little bit about our sponsors, Dental on the Banks. To find out more about them, visit dentalonthebanks.co.uk. Now, like I say, I have got a very special guest, and a special guest from the world of football. Now, this man is well known for his presenting on Match of the Day 2 on ITV Sport, sitting opposite now Sir Gareth Southgate, Lee Dixon, Roy Keane, and many others in places like South Africa, Brazil, Poland, Ukraine, you name it. He's been there. He's a big West Bromwich Albion fan, a big Baggies fan, and it is a pleasure to welcome onto Up the Cherries in all departments, legendary sports presenter, ADRIAN Chiles. Welcome to the show, Adrian. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thank you. Yeah, I'm just off air, so I'm a bit discombobulated, but I'll get myself on track.
Excellent stuff, and it's a pleasure to have you with us. So what I wanted to do firstly, we will come on to your career in a moment, and of course your love for West Brom, but when did your love for football begin?
Oh God, just as a kid. I don't know, you're born with it. I don't know, but I was always kicking a ball about. And my granddad was a big Albion fan. He had a season ticket and went every week. My dad was as well, but he was lapsed. He decided sometime in about the early 70s he couldn't be bothered anymore, and he stuck by that. But the first game I remember watching, I think, was the 1973 Cup final, Leeds and Sunderland. Well, I'm ashamed to say I wanted Leeds to win. I can't think why. But then that was my first lesson in disappointment, because, as a kid, you want the stronger team to win. And I was just 6 years old. Yes. And so I wanted them to win. And of course, Sunderland won. And then it was a year after that, in April 1974, my granddad took me to the first West Brom game, which was at home against Luton Town on the last day of the season. We drew 1-1, and I don't know. I was hooked. I often think it's genetic. Actually, it's a bit like liking or not liking Brussels sprouts,
Yes.
or believing in God, or something. Some people just have it in them, and some people just don't. Not so much a love of football, but this this sense of being sort of bonded to a team. Psychologists call it being sort of emotionally fused with something. And I was definitely emotionally fused with West Brom from a young age.
And of course, you had some great players when you was growing up, the likes of Cyrille Regis, who's sadly no longer with us, Bryan, Robson, and of course you did make a title challenge back in 1978-79. What was that like watching those sort of players? And is there any other heroes that do stand out for you, Adrian?
I was, well, it was like Big Cyrille and Laurie and Brendan, who came to be known as the 3 Degrees. Willie Johnston we had on the wing was a like mercurial player. It's fantastic. I mean, I kind of loved them all. John Weil, our centre half, was sort of magnificent. Looked like a really decent man with it. And then we had a midfielder called Len Cantello. He was kind of a name to conjure with, a bit of an enforcer. And I liked him because he looked like the bloke, David, somebody who played the Invisible Man in a TV series at the time. So I mean, look, it was a fantastic time. I remember that our run in the UEFA Cup when we got to the quarterfinals and we lost at home to Red Star Belgrade on my 11th birthday. And it thoroughly ruined my birthday. And they read my name out. Happy birthday to Adrian Chiles, sitting in the rainbow stand here at the Hawthorns. And there I was sitting there, and I mean, that was, you know, a moment I'll never forget, just having my name read out at the Hawthorns by that familiar announcer's voice, you know, and then, you know, going home and sobbing all the way home because we'd come second to Red Star Belgrade.
How close were you to winning the title that year? Because you did come very, very close, didn't you, at certain points in the season?
Yeah. I mean, we kind of all I know is that we ended up not winning. I mean, I went to every home game that season, and sort of those are sort of more adult Albion fans at the time tell me the winter freeze was key. Where we couldn't get a game on, and for the snow, and then that caused a lot of fixture congestion mid-season, and we couldn't quite get it over the line. So, but my God, we were so good. Nobody could deal with. But Cyrille Regis was later described to me by Alan Hansen as being unfoulable. He was so quick and so strong, and nobody could catch Laurie Cunningham. So yeah, it was. Well, I suppose as a kid, you know, I wasn't yet in my teens. You think, oh well, never mind. You know, came close, very disappointing. We'll do it another year. You just don't realise, not necessarily. You know, is what football fans need to have. That, you know, there's 2 words tattooed on their arms at some stage.
Well, we'll come back to the game, of course, this weekend in the FA Cup. But I wanted to touch upon your career. What tempted you into the world of journalism, and what were your early days like at the News of the World?
Well, I was at the News of the World. I was just a freelance. That came about because I was doing a journalism course in at what was then the Cardiff Institute, which is probably known as the University of somewhere or other. I don't know what it is actually, what it's called, but it was the Cardiff Institute. And I did a very good journalism course there. And there was a friend of mine was doing some freelancing for a radio station. I went to a Cardiff City game with him, and I got talking to one of the other journalists there who had to write a match report for the Daily Express, I think it was, for Monday morning. I thought, well, I can do that. I could write a match report on a game on a Saturday and not file it till the Sunday. So I spoke to one of the tutors, and he put me in touch with an agency called Hills Welsh Press. And I went to speak to them, and then I got a call a couple of weeks later saying, can you do Bridgend versus Newport? And I went, that's rugby, isn't it? And they say, can you do rugby? I went, yeah. But I knew a bit about rugby, but nothing like what I knew about football. But, and I remember talking to a friend of mine I've been at university with who played rugby, and he was talking to me through what number was each position, and it was that basic. And then I went to this freezing cold Bridgend versus Newport game. I remember, a foul was given, penalty was given, and I looked along the line of rugby correspondents, and I said, what was that for? And they all looked at each other, and the consensus was that nobody knew. But I mean, the bigger challenge was that, I had to get the report in for like 400 words, phoned through to the News of the World in Wapping for the final whistle. So I had literally no writing time. So I was watching a game in the freezing cold where I barely understood the rules. Neither did anybody else. And I didn't know what was going to happen. And it was so muddy, I couldn't see the numbers on the back of their shirts. And I hardly knew anybody's name. And somehow I managed to get 400 words away. Which, it's probably one of the hardest journalistic tasks I've ever done, really. And that got in the News of the World the following day. And then they used me via the agency for the next few months. And that was a great help, in setting me on my way.
Well, you did make your break into radio and then TV in 1993, joining Working Lunch in 1994. Working Lunch was very different to the sports journalism that you were used to. How did you initially adapt, and did you manage to find room for your love of football within the show?
Well, yeah, I always think I didn't start out in sports journalism. No, it was the first journalism that I did. The first proper job I had was working at the BBC in the business news department. So for me, it was, I loved doing it because business and economics was, so I'm interested in and curious about everything, which helps. And I think that's the main thing you need as a journalist. If you haven't got curiosity, you've got nothing. But I just found it, I just found it really fascinating. I wasn't frightened of sort of what I didn't understand. I just asked people around me what's going on. So I bought that kind of, I don't know, I had that sort of sensibility about it. And I found it, I suppose I ended up doing a lot of football journalistically, or on television anyway, presenting on television and radio. And I never found it as fulfilling really as doing business news and other kinds of journalism, because there was more unknown about the other stuff, which is what made it fascinating for me. And a phenomenon I became more clear about when I started doing football and dealing with analysts and pundits and so on. It did strike me that whereas with broadcasting on business and money news, you were taking something which was inherently, potentially at least, complicated and making it as simple as possible. Mm-hmm. Now, it seemed to me sometimes with football, it was the opposite. You were taking something that was inherently simple and making it as complicated as you possibly could, in terms of match analysis and who runs where and whatnot. But as I realized there was so much to it, I was in awe of analysts like Lee Dixon and before him Gordon Strachan. It was like the fog clearing as they explained what was happening in matches. It was just and I've never been good on tactics, and I was like slagged off for that, probably not unfairly by people. But I just found, I always know when somebody's something's going well or something's not. Oh, well, that's a good tackle or that's a good goal. But in terms of patterns of play and formations and clever switches, unless I've got Lee Dixon sitting next to me, I never, I can't really have any appreciation of it. So, that was something I did enjoy about doing football.
Well, of course, you was on Match of the Day. You was presenting the Sunday games, and during your time on Match of the Day, you would have reported on that great escape for West Brom during the 2005 survival battle. Did you ever imagine that happening, Adrian?
Oh God, no! There'll never be another. I don't think there'll ever be another season like that for any team, because, at the time, the key stat was no team had ever been bottom of the Premier League at Christmas and gone on to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think others have matched that achievement since. However, we were actually bottom on the morning of the last day of the season.
Yes.
And went on to survive. Now, that's never going to be beaten. I don't think we'll ever see that again. It was just fantastic. But, it was a freak. One of the last games, it might have been the fourth game from the end. We played Man United and we managed to scrape a draw away at Man United,
Mm-hmm.
which proved key. Every point counted. And Gordon Strachan later said to me, he said, the post-match interviews contained one of the best, Gordon said, his favourite ever question in a post-match interview, where it had been a game and we'd somehow got a draw, even though Man United had something like 34 chances and we'd had none. I think because our goal was a penalty. But anyway, they had loads of chances and we had hardly any. Yet the interview question to Bryan Robson by somebody was, so you got your tactics actually spot on there, Bryan? That is not a tactic that allows 34 attempts on goal. It's just sometimes, the god of football was smiling on us, and then it got to that last game of the season when we had to beat Portsmouth at home, and at the same time Southampton had to lose at home to Man United, Norwich had to win at Fulham, and Crystal Palace had to win at Charlton. Crystal Palace had to lose at Charlton. Crystal Palace had to win at Charlton to stay up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget being in that game at the second half of that game where we were going to beat Portsmouth, partly because they wanted Southampton to go down. So their fans certainly, you can hear a chant on the coverage where they're going,
yes.
Let's score, from the Pompey fans. But then Norwich were getting stuffed at Fulham. Southampton were getting lumped by Man United at home. And then the only game was the problem was that that Palace were drawing at Charlton, and then Palace got a penalty and went ahead, and that was a disaster. It was all going to come to nothing, and then miraculously, was it Quinton Fortune? His surname was Fortune, but there were
yes, yeah, I'm sure it was.
He equalised. I was the only person, I think, in the whole of the East Stand that day who had a radio. It doesn't happen anymore because people aren't listening to radios. It's all on your phones. You're watching things click up. I had this yellow Sony sort of Walkman type radio, and they were all looking at me. What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? And and then we survived. But I think we won 6 games all season. It's a nonsense. No team that only wins 6 games all season ought to be able to stay up. But you know, say the god of football was on our side, and blimey, what a day! I'm getting all nervous thinking about it.
Oh, I've seen the celebrations. Whilst I was preparing the celebrations on the pitch as well. It
Yeah,
was an amazing, amazing day, and I remember watching that, on the coverage after those games, and it was unlikely. I remember West Brom were actually relegated at one point before that final day and
yeah,
managed to turn it round. So yeah, it's never going to be beaten, and
yeah,
it's something that must stick with you forever, really.
yeah. No, it absolutely, it absolutely does. I mean, probably not as much as getting promoted. Was it 3 years before that for the first time,
Yeah.
where Gary Megson pulled off an absolute miracle? Really, we were facing relegation back to the third tier, and he took over right at the end, saved us on the last game of the season. We were at home to Charlton and won, or did whatever we had to do to stay up. The following season got to the playoffs, and then the season after that, I mean, that was as bigger, if not a bigger miracle than the Great Escape, because I think with 10 games to go at the end of March, I think we were something like 10 points behind Wolves, of all teams, in second place. And then we won, of the last 10 games, we won 9 and drew 1. And we ended up having to win at home on the last game of the season against Palace to guarantee promotion. And, incredibly, we did it. Although it was the game before that, away at Bradford, when it threatened to slip in our hands. We had to win at Bradford to keep the whole matter in our hands. And it got to the 89th minute, and it was 0-0, terrible game. And then we got a penalty right in front of us. And that season, I think we'd missed 11 penalties. Almost everybody on the side had a go at taking them. And this time we had this crucial penalty. And Igor Balis, a Slovakian international, had recently made it known to Gary Megson that he took the penalties for the Slovakian national team, and he'd never mentioned it before. But anyway, he got to take the penalty, and we scored, and I've never known anything like it. It was absolute and complete mayhem. I always remember that something that sticks in my mind about it. There's a couple of things, actually. One was just a very short text I got from an old friend of mine, an Albion fan, who wasn't at the game. He was listening. He was sitting in his car somewhere. He just texted me, and he just wrote, God. And that absolutely it really sticks in my mind. And the other was this bloke next to me who had a tattooed head. He looked really hard. And he started crying when we were awarded the penalty. He cried throughout the preparation of the penalty, the scoring of the penalty, the celebrations afterwards, and the final whistle, and the celebrations after the final whistle. And even as I left the ground, he was still sobbing. This bloke, and he might still be there at Valley Parade, still crying, for all I know.
Well, what a story, of course, to get to the Premier League, and then, of course, that great escape. Yeah. But you did make the move. You was on the One Show, and also The Apprentice. You're fired as well. But you did make the move from the BBC to ITV. What tempted you to make that change?
Well, they had a bit of a falling out over something to do with the One Show. It's a long, boring story. A lot of these things, it seems more ridiculous the more that time goes on. So then ITV then came in for me as their main sports presenter.
Yep.
So if there hadn't been this issue with the One Show, I probably wouldn't have gone, or maybe I would. I don't know. But anyway, I went, and it was to be their breakfast presenter as well, and that didn't work. That didn't work out, but I carried on being their main football presenter, which in the end, I mean, I had a great time doing it initially, but it didn't really suit me. Match of the Day 2 was what suited me. You could have a more sideways look at the game, and just presenting live football, which is what the main ITV presenter's job is, didn't really suit me, because I mean, just to say a typical Champions League night on ITV, you know, you're at, in Munich, and you go, welcome to Munich, the Allianz Stadium, whatever it is, Barcelona, the visitors here at Bayern. What a night's going to be. What are your thoughts, Lee Dixon? What are your thoughts, Roy Keane? What are your thoughts, Paul Scholl? We'll go to the break. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Let's go to the break. Come out of the break. Final thought from you, Lee. I'll hand you to Clive Tildesley. Half time comes. Clive gets us to the break, comes out of the break. Welcome back to Munich. 2-0 to Bayern here. Good, solid start. What did you make of that Thomas Muller goal, Lee? Roy, what did you make of the defending for that goal, the second goal? Paul, your thoughts? We'll go to the break. Go to the break. Come out. Clive does the second half. Clive finishes the second half, gets us to the break at the end. Gabriel Clark does a post-match interview with the manager or a player, comes back to me. So, 2-2. You know, Barcelona came back saying, what did you think, Lee? What did you think, Roy? What do you think, Paul? Thank you very much. That's all we've got time for. And that's the end of it. There's no, there wasn't much room to shine. And you were never asked, you're never interviewing anybody. You were just asking prepared questions, which is as it had to be. It just wasn't my forte. I don't think I was particularly good at it. And then you start trying too hard with the little time you have got on the ball, trying to be too clever or too funny. And, I just stopped enjoying it. The tournaments were a bit different. The tournaments were great because you got more time. You got more time to, through the group stages and stuff. And it's brilliant to be in, South Africa or Poland or Brazil for the 2014 World Cup. That was different. And I really kind of enjoyed that. But, in the end, I don't know, I suppose football needs to be sort of more of a hobby for me, because even Match of the Day 2 was kind of a sideline. My main work was, the one show was work, or The Apprentice was work, and it was great. And football was something I sort of did outside work anyway, going and watching the Albion or whatever. A Match of the Day 2. If it's your main thing, it becomes different.
Of course. I did pull up some footage actually the other day, and it was of the 2010 World Cup. The first game, it was the opening ceremony, and you were sat opposite now former England manager Sir Gareth Southgate. Yeah. Could you see Gareth doing what he was going to do in the future from your interactions with him?
I couldn't have seen that, because I think in terms of, at the time, I remember I met Gareth before the tournament, and I think we went for a drink after, and it felt more like he was at the end of something rather than the beginning of something. Mm-hmm. In terms of management. I mean, lovely, intelligent guy. I really liked him. I really loved working with him. And then he left to go and do the England under 21s job. And then it became, increasingly clear he was very good at it. I think it's a different breed to most managers. And I remain, a massive fan of his. And I'm gutted, by the tiniest of margins, it didn't quite work out in the end. And I've talked to him a lot about it, even after, just even that semi-final win.
Yeah.
When, Ollie Watkins scores at the end. Ollie Watkins scores through the legs of the defender. If it catches the inside of gets more of a knock off the inside of the knee of the defender, it doesn't go in. And then Gareth, it then becomes a complete loser. He's a failure. We haven't got to the final. But he just gets just the right deflection, I remember it, off the inside of the leg to take it past the goalkeeper. It goes in. Gareth and the whole team are legends. The whole narrative changes on the tiniest of margins. So I don't know. I don't know where he goes next, but I'll be crossing my fingers for him, sort of wherever he is.
And I think he did a fantastic job with England. Did a really, really good job, considering tournament football is all about those fine margins. That one moment can change everything. But let's come back to West Brom, and of course this game coming up on Saturday.
By the way, I've always had a slight soft spot for Bournemouth.
Yeah,
because ages ago, when I did the 5 Live Saturday morning show, I can't remember how we got to it, but we got a songwriter on from a band called the Bewley Brothers, a bloke called Lance. I really like him. I haven't heard from him for ages. I hope he's doing okay. But he wrote a song with the Bewley Brothers called The Ballad of Wade Elliott.
Yes.
And I really loved that song, and I loved the Bewley Brothers, this band. So it always... And Wade Elliott was obviously playing for Bournemouth at the time. And I remember I interviewed Lance, and I interviewed Wade Elliott as well on air about it. I've always had a slight soft spot for Bournemouth since, and I've had a drink with Lance when I've been down to Bournemouth to see the Albion down there. So So if your second team gives our second team a good hiding, I won't be so upset.
No, fair enough. Well, you are managerless at the moment. Carlos Corberán has left the club. What did you make of the work that he did? And can Chris Brunt make a shout for the role?
Well, Brunty, I don't think wants the job. I don't know, but I don't think he'd be interested in the job. As for Carlos, I think he did a remarkable job. He came in with a difficult time, great upheaval behind the scenes at the club. And then for me, with the resources he had, he did a great job, particularly last season. I would have settled with just avoiding relegation, but we actually got in the playoffs. There are plenty of Albion fans who don't share that view, who would say we should have done a lot better with the squad he had. So I suppose whoever comes in is going to tell us who was right with that. Are we going to see the limitations of the squad we've got, or are we going to see what they were in fact capable of? He seemed a very technical manager, particular way of playing, slavishly passing it out the back, which is the modern way. And I sometimes used to get frustrated. There didn't seem to be a plan B to do it a different way. But, I think it was probably the right time, Sooner or later, every manager, the greatest managers at your club, will run out of road, and you need somebody needs to come in and change things a bit. But we'll see. I don't know how it's going to work out. We might have somebody appointed by tomorrow. You never know. We'll see. I'll just check my my sources and see if we've got anybody yet. But I don't think we have. Or there's some. Hang on a bit. There's some talk that we've got Oh, hang on. This bloke, I don't know how to say his name. Hake or Hake.
Hake,
Oh,
yeah.
I know about him. Yeah. It's not Hake, is it? So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
There was links with, and I'm not going to swear in front of you, Adrian, former manager of AFC Bournemouth and another club,
Yeah.
we won't mention them, Gary O'Neill
Yeah.
joining the club.
I mean,
How
I think,
popular
look,
would that
I
be?
wouldn't have been unhappy about that, but, you know, the manager's job is difficult enough
Yeah.
without, you know, being lumbered, you know, with the, you know, almost sectarian prejudice of, you know, managing your biggest rivals. You know, why would you do that to him? Why would we do it to ourselves? I mean, there was also rumours that Carlos would go to Wolves, where it would have been the same problem in reverse. But, you know, Gary O'Neill's an interesting one. I'll be interested to see where he goes next, because he's obviously got something about him. But another one who, you know, exceeded expectations at Wolves, and then, you know, it was a god of football thing again. Nothing seemed to go right for him. VAR, whatever, just couldn't do right for doing wrong.
And I think he did a good job here as well.
Yeah.
He was given a remit and he fulfilled that remit, and, you know, fair play to him. I think that he was unfairly criticised
Yeah.
by some of our segments of our fan base after, you know, he left the club, you know, and it made sense really with what Andoni Iraola has done since. What do you make of the work that Iraola's done after taking over from Gary?
Well, look, I don't know much. I don't know enough sort of about Bournemouth and how they've managed it. But, you know, in fact, I was looking around half-hearted this morning, and I'll find one. I'd like to see a good long piece about the secret of Bournemouth's success, not just now,
Yeah.
but since you got promoted. Because I don't know. Did you think when was it you were promoted? I bet it was a long. What year was that?
Well, we got promoted in 2015 under
Yeah.
Eddie Howe. You know,
Yeah.
that was remarkable what Eddie did.
Yes,
You know,
I
he's a
remember watching
legend.
that game. Yeah.
Yeah. But we was promoted under Scott Parker, going back to 2021.
Yeah.
And we started off very, very badly.
Yeah.
But, you know, ever since, you know, we've come on leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
So
I think, but from what I know about, from what little know about from behind the scenes at West Brom, is that you know, coaches will come and go, or managers will come and go, and obviously you need a good one. Much more, but more important is you need a good owner, chairman, whatever they call themselves, and obviously chief executive, director of football is key as well. There's very few good ones about, because, you know, coaches will come and go, and to a certain extent, fans can get rid of coaches.
yeah.
But it's not all you can do about the ownership. So the ownership better be right. Now, I don't know exactly what the story is at Bournemouth, but somebody is getting things very right. And, you know, I get, you know, incredibly weary, you know, of the big names still being up there all the time. And I suppose, you know, the sort of fair play football finance rules, which isn't what they're called. I wonder if you applied those retrospectively, if Bournemouth would have been allowed to do what they have gone on to do. You know, spend a bit of money, get themselves promoted and stuff. I don't know what the answer to that is, but it's an interesting way of looking at those new rules.
Considering the West Brom team at the moment, is this game really a priority for West Brom? But secondly, can West Brom boing back to the Premier League this time round?
I mean, it's not impossible. I can't really make a case. I can't make a case for, you know, going, you know, getting one of the top two places. You know, I think a place in the playoffs isn't beyond us, and then we'll see. We'll have no better than a 1 in 4 chance when it comes to that. But look, we could be playing Torquay reserves tomorrow, and I'd be pessimistic about the game. I'm a natural pessimist. But I can't. It'd be difficult to see how we're going to end up in the Premier League next season, but we'll see. I honestly don't know what game we'll play at what team will play at your place. We've got a really good young centre back who's been on loan, Caleb Taylor.
Mhm.
He's been on loan at Wickham, I should say, and done very well. He's actually the son of Make Taylor. Do you remember him?
Oh, yeah.
Goalkeeper.
Yes.
He was at Birmingham. I think he was at Portsmouth.
I think he was as well for a little while, wasn't he?
Yeah, I can't. But anyway, he's his son. Great tall kid. I think he'll probably get a start. I think it'll be interesting to see how he does. But I mean, it's probably more of a priority for Bournemouth in so much as you're a long way from threatening relegation this season.
Yes.
What is your priority? Do you really want to be in Europe? If not, how great would it be to win the cup? I was interviewing Harry Redknapp yesterday, actually, talking about your, beating Man United in the semi-final in the third round in 82, was it? 83?
Yes, yeah.
And I was just thinking then, well, if we're honest, there's not that many clubs who would really, covet the FA Cup as much now as they would have done in the past. But Bournemouth might be a candidate for that this season.
Of course, and this is really the last question. You have covered, football games in the FA Cup from the early rounds all the way to the final. Do you think that the spark has gone from the competition, and how do we get that back?
Yeah, well, plainly it has, and I don't know quite how you get it back. I mean, my own sort of left field suggestion is just be a bit innovative in how you structure it. So, I'd have maybe even a handicap system. I know that's mad, but if you've got a team from 2 divisions below, then give them a 2-0 start in a match. Look, I know it's sort of radical and possibly silly, but I think it needs something radical. Try and get I don't know. Try and just come up with something a bit different.
It's taking
Because as it
replays as
stands,
well.
look at Bramall Lane last night, and everyone said because it's on a Thursday night, but midweek games are quite common. If it had happened to have been played on a Thursday night in 1978, Sheffield United versus Cardiff City, there would have been tens of thousands of there, but there were 8,000, was it? 6,000, was it, at Bramall Lane last night? It's mad.
There was loads of empty seats, wasn't there? And of course, they took away replays as well, which I just didn't understand. There was the lowest team.
Yeah, so I wouldn't have had that. What I would do when the draw is made, I think the lower place team should be able to decide where the game will be.
Yeah.
That's what I would suggest on that. And I think replays were a bit of an anachronism now, but I don't know. I would ordinarily be at Bournemouth tomorrow, but I can't because of family reasons. I've got some stuff to do. But anyway, we'll see.
Well, Adrian, thank you so much for joining me on this show. It's been a real pleasure. All the very, very best with whatever you do next.
Okay,
and
thank you very
no
much.
doubt we'll catch up at a later point.
Okay, hope so, mate. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Cheers, pal. See ya. Ta-da.
And thank you everybody for joining us. Hit the like, subscribe and the bell button below. It helps this channel to grow. Now, whilst you're here, do check out all of our other interviews. Of course, Adrian did mention Harry Redknapp within this interview. This is pretty much Harry Redknapp's home now for AFCB content, and he has been on several times, been on 3 pre-season preview shows where me and Harry do a little bit of a bet. He won last year's. It's neck and neck at the moment between Newcastle and Chelsea. I said Newcastle would finish higher than Chelsea. Didn't look like it was going to happen. Maybe it is now. We shall see. Also, do check out all of our other interviews. We have had Omid Jalili on talking about Ipswich Town, Tiff Nadell talking about Southampton, and he also took me around the circuit at very, very high speeds, which he can do. I wouldn't be trusted to do that myself. We have had the lead man of Kasabian, Tom Meehan, on. We've also had David Icke. We've had Richie Neville from 5, Richard Archer from Hard-Fi, Adam Devlin from the Blue Tones, Gaz Whelan from Happy Mondays, Ocean Colour Scenes, Damon Minchella, Matt Priest from Dodgy, Peter Hooton from The Farm. There's loads of stuff, so go check it out and enjoy all of that. Thank you again for joining us. I did make a little bit of an error. I do appreciate it. I did say to Adrian, we was promoted in 2021. Of course, it was 2022. Who can forget that game against Nottingham Forest at the end of the championship season? But yeah, I do apologise about that. But until the next one, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Up the Cherries, up the Baggies. Fingers crossed that you will be promoted back to the Premier League this year, and all the very best. Thank you for joining us.
The TalkSport Fan Network.
The ultimate on-demand destination for the UK's best fan-led football podcasts.
Want authentic supporter insight on all things Bournemouth? Follow Up the Cherries in all departments on the TalkSport Fan Network.
Club-dedicated content created by the fans, for the fans.
Search TalkSport Fan Network.